Alright, today I'm going to take you through the 5 biggest feuds in UFC history, in my opinion. Right, listen, when it gets personal, we as fans, we absolutely love it.
I love it! Keep going! Keep going!
Look, martial arts is all about discipline and respect and things like that. But when people are going to fight in an octagon and trying to knock each other out, well, it just gets you hyped up for it when the guys literally cannot stand one another, okay? As fans, we can't wait to see it. And over the years, we've been treated to some good ones. We're talking people like Royce Gracie versus Ken Shamrock. That's an old school throwback one. Chuck Liddell versus Tito Ortiz. They didn't like each other just a little bit. Brock Lesnar versus Frank Mir. Khabib Nurmagomedov, Conor McGregor. As I say, you know, the bad blood always makes the fights that extra little bit special, and the anticipation from fans, well, as I said, we can't wait for it. All right, enough of that. Let's get into it. Number 5, Quentin Rampage Jackson versus Rashid Evans. All right, these guys are very different personalities. Quentin Rampage Jackson came over from Pride, where he was known as Slampage, big knockout power, knocked out the Iceman Chuck Liddell to become champion of the world, then lost it to Forrest Griffin. However, still one of the biggest stars in the sport, and Rashid Evans was a former light heavyweight champion as well, who had also knocked out Chuck Liddell. These two were kind of on a collision course. Now, the beef really started when Rampage beat Rashid's teammate Keith Jardine, and then Rashid came into the cage. They squared up, they went face to face. Rampage said we were going to get treated to some black on black crime, his words, not mine, and the fight was one of the biggest fights of that year. But of course, they coached the Ultimate Fighter with one another first. On that show, Rampage and Rashid, they went face to face. They were kicking off. They were having to be separated the whole time. Rampage was ripping doors off the hinges, smashing them to pieces, couldn't control his temper. On the flip side, Rashid, he's a bit more of a cool, calm, collected customer, but he was doing his fair bit of shit talking as well.
I'm gonna beat the brakes off.
Let me tell you why you ain't gonna happen. You too slow.
And all of this resulted in one of the most popular seasons of The Ultimate Fighter. 3 million viewers per episode back in the day on Spike TV. So a sensational product there. And of course, this all culminated to UFC 114, where they would meet in Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, UFC 114, I was on that fight card as well. Rampage Jackson at that time was a training partner, a teammate of mine. So we trained for that fight all together. He was fighting Rashid, obviously. I was fighting Dan Miller in the co-main event. Now, when the fight started, Rashid got off to a tremendous start. Came out massive right hand, kind of sat Rampage down, and then for the most part, he controlled the fight. Used his wrestling to great effect, took him down, kept Rampage guessing, and didn't really allow Rampage to get going. You know, Rampage was getting very frustrated, you know. Hey, but that's the way it goes. This is mixed martial arts. Rashid was the better wrestler. He used it to great effect. And of course, he came out of that one as the winner. Rashid Evans got the job done, won the fight by unanimous decision. Number 4, Anderson the Spider Silva versus Chael Sonnen. Now, when it comes to trash talk, there's not many people that do it better than Chael Sonnen. I mean, he has had some absolute golden lines over the years.
You know, I have a feeling beating up Anderson is going to be like eating Chinese food, and 20 minutes after I do it, I'm going to want to do it again.
And when he came to the UFC on his second run, he was doing all right. He was 3-1 so far with the organisation. But they were all decisions. But it was the trash talk. It was the lines on the microphone. It was the constant call-outs of Anderson Silva that made this one stand out. Listen, for Anderson Silva, it was another day at the office. It was his 7th defense of the middleweight title. So he had clearly established himself as the middleweight GOAT at that point. But Chael Sonnen, as I said, the bad guy, Chael P. Sonnen, from the mean streets of Wesleyan, Oregon, this man was determined to talk shit, to wind Anderson up, and that is exactly what he did.
And by the way, Anderson, if I want your opinion, I will beat it out of you.
For the most part, Anderson would ignore it, but it all changed when Chael very smartly switched his focus from Anderson to the Nogueira brothers. The Nogueira brothers are mentors of Anderson Silva, and he looks up to them. They train him in jiu-jitsu, and he was talking shit. He was talking shit about Brazil. He was saying that when the Nogueira brothers first saw a bus, they tried to feed it a carrot.
Well, this is a true story. There was a bus that pulled up to a red light, and Little Nog tried to feed it a carrot while Big Nog was petting it. He thought it was a horse.
Because they'd never seen technology before. And he went on and on and on. He said that he was going to come over, he was going to slap Anderson's wife on the ass and get her to make him a nice big steak and all the rest of it. Chael certainly did his bit in selling that fight. And Anderson, being Anderson, He was cool, calm and collected. He never got riled once. He didn't take the bait.
No.
So the fight went down at UFC 117, and Chael Sonnen, oh my God, he shocked the world. He was dominating Anderson Silva just all over him in every facet of the game. He dropped him a couple of times with punches. He took him down, he controlled him, he ground and pounded the living hell out of him. But this is what makes Anderson Silva such a goddamn legend, because it's not over until the fat lady sings. And what he did was he came back. There was 2 minutes left in the 5th round. After clearly getting dominated from start to finish, slaps on a triangle and chokes out Chael Sonnen in the final 2 minutes. Just an unbelievable performance. That's why you can never count out Anderson Silva. That's the reason the man is the GOAT. But of course, that fight was very, very exciting. So there was a possibility for a second fight. I was in a title eliminator fight with Chael Sonnen. The winner would go on to fight Anderson Silva. Me and Chael fought in Chicago. It was a very close fight. He used his wrestling. I stopped his takedowns. I took him down in round 3. I landed the bigger shots, but they gave the decision to Chael Sonnen. It is what it is. I got to fight Anderson down the line and I won that fight. But Chael earned himself the rematch at UFC 148 in Las Vegas in 2012. Now, the fight went down much like the first one in the first round. Chael Sonnen went out there, dominating, taking him down, landing good shots. Looked like we were going to see another repeat performance and Chael was going to beat him once and for all. But in round 2, Chael got a little overconfident, didn't he? He went out there, tried to do a spinning back fist on Anderson Silva, slipped, fell over, landed on the floor, thought he was on an episode of Dancing with the Stars as opposed to fighting inside the octagon. Here's the canvas. Anderson takes full advantage of that and makes him eat his words, because Chael was still talking shit. He was talking about his family. He was talking about Brazil. He was talking about all of that shit. But all that shit talk, all that trash talk, all built up to one of the biggest fights that we'd had. Probably the biggest international fight week that the UFC has ever had so far. Number 3, Daniel Cormier versus Jon Jones. Now, this is a big one. Jon Jones and DC, everyone knows, these guys absolutely detest one another. And DC still detests him.
He's a bitch.
Jon Jones beats him twice. There's this shroud of controversy surrounding Jon Jones and the picograms and all that shit, all the steroids and whatnot.
All you motherfuckers are on steroids.
He failed the test in the first one. He tested positive with USADA before the second one. Then they fought a third time. Jones tested positive again. I mean, it's a mess. If you're a Jon Jones fan, if you have him as the GOAT, which I kind of do,
this is #1 bullshit.
It's hard. It's hard to justify that, because the history with the steroids certainly takes away from the legacy. Anyway, this all started, the bad blood, at UFC 121 when it was Cain Velasquez versus Brock Lesnar. Backstage, DC was only 5-0 in MMA, and Jon Jones had heard the buzz about this wrestler coming into mixed martial arts, and Jon Jones said to him, "Oh, I bet I could take you down." DC didn't like that, of course, and they started back and forth. They started talking a little bit of shit. They started getting personal. So anyway, after all this time, the fight was originally set for UFC 178 in 2014. After DC had a few years as a heavyweight, he came down to light heavyweight, and obviously Jon Jones felt a little bit threatened. Now, this all culminated in that famous press conference in the MGM Grand, in the lobby there. Dana White wasn't there, right? Jones and DC, they walk on the stage, they get in each other's faces, then it literally kicks off. All hell breaks loose, a mass riot in the lobby of the MGM Grand. Jon Jones has his shoe off, he's throwing his shoe, people are separating them. I mean, it was a scene, it was a sight. Both guys were fined by the Nevada State Athletic Commission, but however, for us as fans, and even the UFC, they're probably like, oh my God, there could not be any better promotion than this. You know, they fucking hate one another. They've had a fight, and now it's going to kick off, and the pay-per-view sales are going to go through the absolute goddamn roof. Now, in the first fight, very, very close, but Jon Jones got the decision. When they did ultimately fight the second time, it was a head kick knockout in Anaheim, California. It was the beginning of the end, the beginning of the knockout for DC. And I love DC, and I hate to say that, but Jon Jones was the better man.
You never beat me.
Of course, he did test positive. There was another rematch he was supposed to have at UFC 200. Jon Jones tested positive there. So that's why still to this day, DC cannot stand Jon Jones. Jones doesn't like him either. But still, as fans, the fact that they hated one another, we loved it. Number 2, Colby Covington versus Jorge Masvidal. Now look, listen, these two used to be good mates. They used to be best mates. They used to be roommates, training partners, best buddies, okay? And when they're training partners and then they begin to dislike one another, it makes that bad blood even more intense. But look, listen, as I said, these two absolutely despised one another. Now, obviously with the rise and the success of Jorge Masvidal. In 2019, he had an incredible run. Knocked out Darren Till, knocked out Ben Askren, beat down Nate Diaz. And Colby Covington, he was one of the top welterweights as well. Of course, he'd already fought Kamaru Usman for the belt. So these two were bound to meet at some point. Now, when they did meet, the trash talk was off the scale.
I'm glad you got mad herpes. You're nervous again. You got an outbreak.
This wasn't trash talk. This was personal. This was nasty shit, okay? Even when they were at the press conference, they just screamed at one another. Wouldn't let either man get a word in. You know, didn't sit there and wait for one another. Just went crazy. Covington was saying he was a bad father, right? He was saying all kinds of shit. He was talking about his family. He was talking about his friends. He was talking about his children. You know, listen, I asked Covington about it in an interview I did with BT Sport, and he said, listen, I'm just telling the truth. All I'm doing is telling the truth. Obviously, Masvidal didn't take kindly to that. And me personally, I think, you know, there is a certain cutoff. You know, you can say whatever you want about the guy that you're going to fight. I think you can even talk about his training partners. But families, wives, children, that stuff's got to be off the table. But Covington did not give a fuck.
More of his family likes me than they even like him.
Okay, and, you know, rightly or wrongly, as fans, we absolutely loved it. Now, the fight went down in March earlier this year, UFC 272, and Colby Covington dominated the absolute fight. Okay, used his wrestling to great effect, controlled him up against the fence, hit takedown after takedown. Masvidal landed a few shots, but the reality is it was one-way traffic throughout the entirety of the fight. But Jorge Masvidal warned him. He said, this is not over. And of course, it's still not over to this day, because what happened was, they're in Miami. Covington's sitting down. He's having dinner at Pappy's Steakhouse. And who walks over? A disguised Jorge Masvidal. Allegedly, because there's a court case going on. Okay, now Masvidal's up on charges of assault. Covington's suing him. He's taking him to court. He said that he's got injuries. He said he's got brain damage. He said he's got a tooth knocked out. He's got his Rolex damaged. Masvidal says it's a fake Rolex. So yeah, the drama is still continuing to this day. I don't want to say too much about it because I don't want to get sued. But still, there it is. There is number 2, which brings us, of course, to our number 1. I am, of course, talking about Khabib Nurmagomedov against the notorious one, Conor McGregor. Now, as I said, that last pick, that ended up with police getting involved and the court case is ongoing. Well, the same one with this one, with Conor and Khabib, you know, because these two, you know, it was a wild one, wasn't it? It all started because Khabib Nurmagomedov had some words on an episode of The Embedded with Artem Lobov. Artem Lobov is a training partner and a friend of Conor McGregor. Conor, being a loyal friend, saw that, thought, fuck this guy, jumps on a plane from Dublin, a private jet with all his buddies, fueled off alcohol and jet fuel, jump in the jet, fly over to the Atlantic to go confront Khabib Nurmagomedov. Now, granted, that is a very, very loyal friend and he does deserve some props for that. But on that long 6-hour flight, you would have thought at some point they'd calm down. You know, at some point they'd have a little nap and wake up and go, hold on a minute, what are we doing? What are we doing? Do we really want to do this? Turn the fucking jet round, let's go. But no, wisdom did not prevail. They went on the attack, and as we know, it all ended up in that very, very infamous Brooklyn bus attack. It was at the weigh-ins, I think, all the fighters were leaving. Conor and crew fucking running, go psycho. Conor picks up the dollies, throwing it at the windows. It was quite the sight. Now, as we know, for that offence, Conor was charged, and I think he was given community service. But of course, come on, when something like that goes down, the fight has to be made. And what a event this was. UFC 229, I do believe. And this one was one of the biggest pay-per-views, if not the biggest pay-per-view that the UFC have done. I think it broke over 2 million buys. At the press conferences, Conor was just going on a crazy attack.
Smash me, mate. Smash me. Yeah, smash me. You say send location. Here it is right here in front of you. I'm right in front of you.
All hyped up, going mad. Khabib sitting there rather stoic, not really responding, not saying much. But of course, as fans, as I said, the trash talk, the build-up, the hype, we absolutely love it. Okay, and we couldn't wait for this one. I was there, I worked at the event, and Khabib went out and he dominated the fight, and he got the submission in round 4 with a neck crank / rear naked choke, whichever one you want to call it. I got to say, Conor impressed me with his takedown defense. Khabib is an incredible wrestler, takes most people down with ease. Conor managed to fight him off for a little bit, but of course eventually succumbed to the wrestling, the ground and pound, got dropped a couple of times, landed some shot. Khabib told him, brother, yeah, you talk to me now. And Conor's like, it's only business. It's just business. So there was a lot of shit talk going on through the fight, and of course Khabib was calling him out for years as well. And it was an entertaining fight. Conor loses in round 4. Khabib is declared the victor, and then what does he do? Jumps over the fucking cage, flies double-legged, feet in the air towards Dylan Dennis. Kicks him in the face, attacks Dylan Dennis. All the Russians jump in the cage, the Irish jump in the cage, and there is a mass brawl at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada. I mean, it was just absolutely wild. So anytime you act like that, the Nevada State Athletic Commission, they're not going to let people get away with that. So Khabib was fined $500,000 by the Nevada Commission, and he was ordered to do an anti-bullying PSA, but he refused to do one. He said that Nevada is a place that is full of drugs, gambling, and prostitution is legal, so they can work on themselves. And then McGregor was fined $50,000. Ever since then, Khabib went off, became the GOAT. He retired 29-0. Conor McGregor has called him out ever since, talked shit about it. But there it is. If that isn't an example of how trash talk can propel a fight to be successful, it can draw the interest in the public, I don't know what does. Because that was the biggest pay-per-view of all time for the UFC.